Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you so much for downloading the Faith Life podcast of Discovery Fellowship Church. I'm your host, Pastor Nathan, here with my co-host, as always, Pastor Matt.
Hey, guys.
I almost said Indomitable.
Ooh.
But that makes me think of Jurassic World, because the big, super dinosaurs they make is the Indominus Rex or something like that.
Me too.
What does Indomitable actually mean? Can I get a fact check on this one?
Incapable of being subdued. Unconquerable.
So the Indomitable Pastor Matt is a pretty intense descriptor?
That's.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Whether you are listening on the podcast, whether you are watching it on YouTube, we are here with episode number 84.
Woo.
It's a lot of episodes.
Almost a hundy.
Straight hundy. Episode 100. I think we should do something kind of special. I'm still trying to figure out what that is going to be.
Dance party.
It will just be a dance party the whole time.
Love it.
No, it won't be a dance party, but it will be something cool. So stay tuned in 15 weeks, 16 weeks for that.
Man.
In the meantime, if you haven't done so already, please take a minute, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you have heard this or listen to this. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, like, all of that good stuff helps the podcast get out a little bit to other people, and go that extra step. Share this with somebody who might benefit from hearing it. Don't forget, you can always email us at podcast@dfchurch.com. That's podcast@dfchurch.com, or comment on the YouTube video. Either way, we'll get your messages and maybe read them here on the show. Now, today, as we get started, Matt.
Yes.
The biggest news. We've talked about this before. This has been on episodes in the past. And in fact, it was on when I did that most recent replay, which came from a pre-video time. This news was on there. And yet we're finally here. The day has come as of yesterday from when we're recording this. So on Wednesday, Congress has officially passed the TikTok ban, and President Biden has signed it into law. TikTok now has 9 months to sell the company to a U.S. interest or be banned from the app stores. And it's really weird. What they do is they don't ban the company itself, but they will fine an app store for having it on their marketplace. So if you already have the app, theoretically nothing would change. You still have it on your phone.
Okay.
It's just if you don't have it, you can never download it, and they can never update it after that.
After 6 months from now.
9, I think, is what they got it.
Okay.
Now, a couple interesting things about this. First of all, and this is the thing that honestly kind of drives me crazy, and I think it's a bigger issue on the way our government works that I wish they did not ever do this. And it's this. This was bundled in with a support bill. So the initial bill said, hey, we're going to pledge, this much dollar amount to support Ukraine, and we're going to put in this much dollar amount for Israel support. And then, by the way, it bans TikTok. And it's like, why?
There's so much wrong with that.
Right. It creates a situation where now you can't vote against it without looking like you don't support these other countries.
Right.
And this has always been a problem in American politics where things get bundled together as a way to force certain things through. But I think, why are we still doing that? Let each bill
stand on its own, right?
Just be its own, be a single issue bill. And then they have too much. It's what else are they doing other than reviewing legislation and voting on it? That's what our government's supposed to be doing. So if they suddenly have 5 to vote for instead of 1 to vote for, okay.
I'd much rather Congress have to read 5 separate bills that are each 80 pages instead of one bill that's hundreds and hundreds of pages where things are just hidden in there. That it seems silly.
It just seems silly. And it's okay, you want to start talking about what do we do to fix the government because it's got issues. Maybe part of the problem is can't, they have to wait till they all get there and then they have to figure it out. It's like, let's do remote voting. We've got the technology now. Let them get into a big old Zoom call if they need to and get it figured out.
A big old Zoom call.
Like they can all stay in their home states and do it. What else are they doing? Right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Campaigning for the next election.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the next part. We're talking about how to fix the government. Nathan's fix the government plan. Single issue bills, remote meetings and voting, like the rest of us have to deal with. Term limits, so that they're not always trying. It doesn't have to be the same as the president. Maybe it's 4 terms or 10 terms. I don't know.
I love it.
That's it. Fix the government.
Nathan for president, you guys. Let's go.
I don't need. Here's the problem. The only way to get all this stuff in would be for the people in to vote for it, and this would be against their own interest. They would never, because it'd be like voting on a pay cap. They're never going to do it. Come on, man. We the people. Let's take the power back.
Seriously.
This is going to get into our main topic for today.
Oh, no.
Revolution. I'm just kidding. All right. So
I prefer revival.
I love it. Here's the thing with the TikTok ban. Let's circle it back to that. Obviously, and I already saw a video from TikTok. Their CEO.
They're going to fight it.
They're going to fight it in the court. They're going to take it. And I'd imagine it goes up pretty quick to a Supreme Court issue. And I'd imagine it's a First Amendment thing, right? Like as a form of expression for Apple to, let users use this application.
Right.
Will this be struck down as unconstitutional? At least that part of the bill.
So I haven't read the details, but I saw a headline that says legal experts say the TikTok divest or ban bill could stand up in court despite being a free speech disaster.
Interesting.
So there's got to be something in there that makes the legal experts at least think that our government stands a chance. That's weird.
It just seems weird. And it's like, well, I guess what really frustrates me is there's so much stuff. It's just like all this talk about, it's a Chinese, or they're using it to influence us and steal our data. It's like, first of all, every other company in America is already selling our data to China and everywhere else. This is not necessarily any different. And really, what are they influencing me to do? Because I see a lot of videos on I haven't been on sea shanties in a while. I see a lot of cooking videos.
You will now that you just said that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I see a lot of videos on theology from really cool pastors and Christian creators. And I see a lot of AI generated music now. That's hilarious. But I don't think they're influencing me in this supremely evil way that nobody else is.
You know what's creepy about social media?
Tell me.
I think I actually told you this because you were over at my house when it happened. So we have in our front yard this tree. It's pear is in its name, but it doesn't actually produce fruit. Very popular in HOAs because it flowers really pretty, but the flowers are small and they biodegrade super quick, so it doesn't leave a mess. Early leaves color changing, right? So early in the fall they start to change colors and it lasts a long time before they drop. So it's just really pretty in neighborhoods. Okay. First of all, the flowers stink on it.
Do they smell like rotten meat? There's a certain tree that its flowers, to me, every time I smell it, it's like a rotten, rancid meat smell. Nobody else seems to notice it, but it makes me want to vomit.
Yeah, I think it smells like maybe something else, but so what happened was Melinda went out and cut some of the branches off, the low-hanging ones that were really flowery, just to put in a vase in our house because we're having people over for dinner. Okay. And it was just going to be a pretty centerpiece or decoration or whatever. But she cuts them. She's like, man, these stink. Brings them in the house. Smell this. It's oh, that's disgusting. So she puts those outside. We don't have that inside. We get something else.
Thank you.
About 2 hours later, I was like, I'm gonna open up TikTok, see what's going on. Third video, as I'm swiping, right? Third video, a botanist talking about this tree specifically. I never said this tree by name because I didn't know its name prior to watching this video. We said it stinks. The flowers on this tree stink. So I get a 3-minute video about this particular tree and all the ins and outs of it. And I was like, that is impressively creepy.
Here's the thing. I think if your phone, We know, okay, so on the one hand, we know it's actively listening at least for the wake up word.
Right, because we can say that in it.
We can say that. Yep. It's just like the Amazon devices in all of our houses. Yep. Now, I don't know how the phone works. I do know, I've researched a little bit on those other devices, on the Amazon devices, and what they do is they're always listening, but they are never recording for privacy purposes. Right. They actually, if you look at the hardware, it's got like a 64 kilobit, like very small memory buffer. And so basically it's always listening, but it's constantly having to write over itself until it hears its word, in which case it powers up and starts getting everything. Right? Now, if that's the case, it's not, if your phone is a similar thing, because here's what I'm thinking. If it was always listening, record and transcribing and putting it into these types of things, wouldn't that use a ton of energy?
Right.
Constantly.
Yeah.
If it were doing that much, as well as if it were the amount to be able to live transcribe, it's either recording your audio and that's taking a lot of data. It's sending your audio up to a cloud to transcribe. That's sending a lot of data on the network. Like the practicality of it always listening and comprehending and then impacting you. I don't know. And if maybe I'm wrong from a technological standpoint, it seems like that would be a very easily seen thing,
right?
Like a very provable thing.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, is it, and I there's some documentary about social media that said no, that it was like people who worked in it and they're saying, no, we don't listen to you. We just know enough data about you that our predictions for what you're going to want to hear are so ridiculously accurate that it feels like it.
So creepy.
And I don't know if that's worse.
I love it.
It might be.
Yeah.
So it's possible. It's not that the fact of it was that you brought in a thing and you said it smells bad and then it knew from that what it might not be that. It might just be it knows who both of you are. It knows that you had dinner plans that night because you had seen maybe your emails inviting people over. It knows what time of year it is. It knows where you live, so it knows what plants are there. Like it's possible that it just knows so much other data about you that it predicts that you'll like a video like that.
Here's the thing.
And then when you watch it and you sit and watch that whole video, it says, yep, we were right, and it reinforces that data.
Yeah. My guess is that these companies know more about me than I do.
100%.
Yeah.
It's like there's a thing that says,
so fun.
I'm not sure if this is still accurate, but at one point I was reading about how Facebook, whether or not you are a person who has an account, Facebook has your account there already. They have a profile made of you, even if you've never created an account with them.
Wow.
And they continue to keep as much data on it as possible so that if you sign up, they very quickly can get started on making sure everything's targeted to you the way it needs to be, and your friends are going to be suggested and things like that.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. Now, it's also kind of a weird thing because on the one hand, it's like a crazy violation of privacy to some extent, right? But on the other hand, we've all willingly allowed this by participating in any digital thing. And let's take it even one more. It's not like Mark Zuckerberg is like, all right, I'm going to type in Matt Braggins and here's his profile. Here's everything he dreams about. Or the ads are not like, all right, we saw that Matt Braggins loves trees or blah, blah, blah. It's so much more behind the scenes and in the background where it's like, hey, here's a company that sells trees. We want to sell it to the right people. And a computer then says, here's who it is. So it's not like people are seeing your data.
Right.
The machines are seeing all your data.
It's smart because I've also gotten a lot of ads and videos in all social medias, not just TikTok. This is all of them, about fast growing trees. Because Melinda and I went to a nursery to look at fast growing trees to create a privacy fence essentially in our backyard. Hope the HOA is not listening. Because if we plant them small enough, that's allowed. And then they grow. I didn't plant a tree over a certain size. It's allowed to grow into that. And so kind of creating a privacy fence because we back the green space, but out of these trees. And so we looked at them and now I'm getting constant like fast growing trees shipped straight to your door.
Did you wait?
On
you
sale
looked at
today.
them on
in person.
Right. So here's the thing,
But
though.
then on my phone, I searched the name of that tree to see like what other information I could
and
get
the
from
data
it.
shows that you were at a place where trees were, like your
Isn't that
GPS
odd?
data.
Man.
And then
Honestly, it's impressive.
Here's the thing. When were you guys looking at trees? Was it before or after this dinner thing?
Before.
Okay. So it already knew.
Yeah, because dinner was on the 13th, right?
I think so.
So April 12th is when we went to.
So even more so. See, it didn't need to listen to you. It knew you were looking at trees already.
Dude, it's creepy. All right, one more news thing.
Let's go to one more news thing.
This was just kind of fun. So if you live in the
is it going to be one more or two more? Because do we want to do a quick follow up on last week's crazy off the detour?
We can do a
news?
quick follow up.
Okay,
let's make that one super quick. I'll make this one quick too.
Okay.
So down near Denver, there's this new apartment complex that's being built, and I've driven by it a couple times, and I keep thinking it's unfinished.
Okay.
But it's supposed to look like this. It essentially like it's like all glass fancy looking, except through the middle there's this like wavy, unfinished, almost like Flintstones looking cave like canyon structure looking thing.
Do you have a picture of this building somewhere that I can see? Because I cannot picture what you're talking about.
That right there.
Oh, that does
put it up if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah. That looks unfinished.
Totally looks unfinished, but apparently that's its design. It reminds me of like Flintstones meet modern day skyrise in downtown.
That's crazy, but okay.
I just saw this article. The penthouse there, $15,000 a month to live in an apartment in Denver that looks like the Flintstones meets, your local business.
Who?
$15,000 a month for
all
a
right,
penthouse.
real talk. Who's living in these places?
4-bedroom, 3.5 bath.
Okay.
That's a lot of money.
Let's say that was half your income, right? So let's say you're making $30,000 a month.
Okay.
And that's $360,000 a year is your income. If you're
spending that half of your
monthly income on your rent, that's how much you would want to make.
So, well, in building, spending half of your income on rent is frowned upon anyway.
Right.
Like that's outside of what's recommended.
What's the amount you should spend?
I want to say Ramsey says like 30.
Okay. So if that's I don't know. It's just here's the thing. If you make that much money, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Making that much money that then you want to go live in this crazy apartment.
Right. Now, I think in the future, it actually looks like it might be pretty cool because all that open area, it looks like their goal is to have trees and plants and stuff that all grows out of it. So they're like visualizations that they've done for the future of it. Looks kind of neat.
Remember when we were looking at that visualization of the future of the area over east of I-25 where In-N-Out is being built?
Yes.
What's the time schedule for that?
I didn't see a timeline. It looks like it's so far away.
All right. Well, the last news story then. Let's do a quick follow-up. So we talked a lot last week about Mark Driscoll and John Lindell, the pastor at the church who was hosting a men's conference. Yep. Go back. We went on quite a large tangent. Here's one of the videos we saw this week, though, in the meantime, that was really weird. John Lindell, the pastor from the church, came out and said, this sword-swallowing guy, he came out and defended him on stage. He said, "You don't know anything about this guy. Here's the thing. He is a born-again Christian.
Gave his life to Jesus like 10 years ago.
He witnesses to people. Him and his family love Jesus. They go to this church in California. And so we all have a past, but this guy loves Jesus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera," which... all that is great, right? If somebody, even Paul, I love Paul when he talks about like this list of sins and he says, "And such were some of you."
Yeah.
But look what has happened now because of Jesus.
Yeah,
right?
We're made new. We're 100% new creation in Christ. Love it.
If all of what he said was true,
what
then
do you
yes,
mean,
we should all feel bad about tearing this guy down.
Yeah.
Maybe. Apparently none of it's, well, maybe not none of it. He's married. He has no kids. This sword swallower guy.
So the video that we saw, because the sword swallowing stripper guy responded
to John Lindell.
So these are his own words that we're talking about.
Straight from him. He said, "I'm not a born again Christian."
He didn't say he's married. I thought in the video, he says, "I do have a family."
Oh, you're right.
No kids.
He says, "I have a family, but no kids."
Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting choice
of words,
because I would say, "Yeah, I have a wife, but no kids," or "I have," right? But he says, "I have a family and no kids."
I have a family. So I don't have kids yet. I'm not a born again Christian. He says he was Orthodox, which means he was baptized as a baby. He doesn't actively seem to attend anything Orthodox. He said at some point, because his friends went there, he was attending a church in California.
Erwin McManus's church, I think is what he said.
Sure. I don't remember what he said the church's name was, but it's not. And then he says when he thinks about being saved by God, it's when he's got the sword down his throat and he slides down the pole and he stops himself an inch from the ground. That's when God saves him. It's not anything else. And so, the question is, was John Lindell trying to calm all the controversy by saying, "Look, here's who this guy is"? The question, and we don't have an answer for this, did John Lindell know that everything he was saying was a lie?
Right. Or did someone else tell him?
Or did somebody else give him some info and he took it on good faith?
That's
either way, it's not good for the lead pastor. Either he's saying a bunch of stuff, and if it was told to him by somebody who works for him, then that guy should probably be fired because he doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's knowingly lying, not thinking that this guy would come out and say something. I don't know what is going on with this.
The more I've followed up on this and looked into it, the wackier it gets. Now, I'm not defending Mark and what he said, the way he handled it.
Sure.
His history as a pastor, I'm ignoring all that in this situation here.
Okay.
John Lindell, I watched more video of Mark and John on stage together, supposedly that section where they reconcile, but then the following Sunday at church, John Lindell just spent the whole sermon ripping Mark. So that was really interesting and going against everything that John complained to Mark about coming to me with your concerns,
right,
instead of publicly airing them. So hypocrisy at its finest right here. But he said essentially, we should not question God's anointed. So he says that to Mark on stage, everyone claps and cheers. I'm really disappointed that Mark Driscoll didn't be like, hold up, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We should question.
100%.
In fact, for you to sit here and say, don't question me, I'm your pastor, I'm in charge, is a giant red flag that says you are not humbly surrendering your life to Jesus.
Right. If you say, I'm the pastor, when I speak, the thinking has been done, and you are sinning if you even question it. Ooh, that's not a good look.
That is a slippery slope, my friends.
It's like a cult. That's how you start a cult.
That's how you start cults.
Which, might be fun in some contexts, but it's probably not good for God's people.
It's the weirdest. It just got weirder.
It's just getting weirder and weirder. Now, this is, again, not to spend too much time on a side topic, but we did see another video this week, and maybe we'll come back into this more in depth on a later episode. This whole video we saw was talking about how the American church has gone so far into a consumeristic mindset that we leave reviews online for churches just like we would a restaurant. Right. And that is, I think, a problem. I think that that critical attitude, and the guy in the video said, look, you might say, well, I've never written a review on a website, and he says, but what about on the drive home from church? Have you expressed that? Have you gone into church with a critical attitude of, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, here's what I liked, here's what I didn't like? Have we treated it more like an experience that we consumed rather than a body that we've contributed to? Okay. And so I don't want to say, when we say you should be able to criticize a pastor, right? Or you should be able to say, here's a problem with a pastor. We don't want to foster an attitude of the consumeristic, here's the things that worked and didn't work, and here's why I liked the music, and here's the song I didn't like, right? Like that, deconstructing it into just what I enjoyed or didn't like about it. That kind of critical attitude, I don't think is healthy for a church member. Now, if it's the pastor said Jesus was a sinner. Okay. That is a good critique to make of that pastor. Say, hey, that's heresy.
Right.
Or the pastor said, hey, if you want to really be saved, you need to be baptized, and I need to see you volunteering 5 hours a week, and then you'll be saved.
And tithing.
Right. So there is a way to be discerning towards false leaders. There is and just like we're doing right now when talking about Mark Driscoll, John Lindell, this men's conference, there is so I think the difficulty is as Christians is how do we balance genuinely paying attention to who the pastor is, what they say, watching out for heresy from leaders.
Right.
So that's on the one hand, biblically we are called to that. But on the other hand, not turning it into, I didn't like the music, I didn't like the lights, it was too loud, it was too quiet, it was too many hymns, not enough hymns. The pastor talked about this, the pastor didn't talk about, like there is a certain attitude that's just consumeristic.
100%.
So how do we what's the proper balance on that?
I feel like we've talked about church life, church involvement in a podcast in the past. Maybe if we didn't get into a lot of detail, we can do that again, because I think it's a lot more than just a quick news story response.
Yeah. That's what I said. We might come back to this as a full episode
I think
later.
we should come back to it.
But just briefly.
Yeah,
give me the 2-sentence.
Yeah, my responsibility as a church goer is to be a regular contributor in this community.
Right.
Right. And so it's that consumer versus contributor type of mindset. Yes, we as church leaders try and structure and plan and coordinate things to help you, for you, right? I don't orchestrate a church service for me, right? I do it to draw God's people together, to point us all towards worshiping Jesus through song, through prayer, through reading God's word together, through exhortation, through discipleship. All those things are a part of it. And so for us to come in and just say, well, that lady's perfume was not my favorite scent, and I had to sit next to her, I'm never going back to that church again.
Right.
Or that song had a chorus on repeat too many times, I'm never going back to that church again.
Right.
It's a whole, like, the grass is always greener, right? If I go with that critical attitude, I can find something to complain about everywhere, about everything, always.
Right.
If I go with this attitude of, man, this is a day that God has made, I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. I'm going to come and I'm going to worship with my brothers and sisters in Christ. My eyes are turned up, focused on Jesus first and foremost.
Yeah.
And then how I can help others do the same. I go in with that attitude. I think I'm going to live that joy-filled life that Jesus talks about.
Right.
Right. That full life. So I don't know.
I love it. Well, let's move on to our Bible segment. As faithful listeners, you might know we are reading the Bible throughout the year. We're going to read the entire Bible this year, and you can be a part of that. You can read it with us. It's super easy. Again, I'll say this every week, even if you haven't read any of it, just jump in right where we are. Jump in today, tomorrow. It doesn't matter. Any Bible is better than no Bible. So you can check the comments, the description of this episode, both on YouTube and in the podcast description, for a link directly to read the Bible with us. Now, Matt, what has jumped out at you this week? So
we started reading Judges this week.
Yes, we did.
And Judges is
epic.
Yeah. There's a lot of the, like, we did a series with our youth, like the scary, gross, weird stories of the Bible, like through the summer. Judges had a lot of them.
Judges has a lot. There's a lot of mess up stuff going on.
Yeah. And so, like, if anyone ever says the Bible's just boring, it's full of boring stuff,
read Judges.
Maybe read some Judges.
There's assassins who are lefties like me.
Now you might come back with less of the Bible is boring and more what is happening.
So this also brings up a pretty important principle of the prescriptive versus descriptive.
Okay.
Right? A lot of what's happening in Judges is not saying this is good. It's not saying this is how it should.
So you're saying a tent peg through the temple is not prescriptive.
Well, maybe. Depends on who the person is. I did like the 10 peg through the temple, and then they sang a song about it. I was going to have AI write us a song similar to it. But yeah, that's the thing. There's a very key verse to understanding Judges. It says everyone did what was right in their own eyes.
Yeah.
And that just is the thing that unlocks the rest of the book for you, because everybody is doing what they think is right, not what God says is right, but what they feel like the right thing to do. And it leads to a lot of terrible things. So that's Judges, man.
Yeah. The sword through the belly
of the king.
And then like it gets swallowed up.
Yeah, and because he's fat.
Yeah.
That one's awesome, again, because it's a lefty, and so he puts the sword on his right side, and everybody assumes, well, they're right-handed. We'll only check the other side for swords, I'm assuming. That's why they make mention of it.
Right.
Which, pretty bad security at the king's palace.
100%.
Like, maybe just check everywhere, not just the place where you'd think they'd most likely hide the sword, but whatever. So then he goes in and he says, I've got a message from God for you. And the king says, oh, what is it? And he goes, Ka-cha! Kills him. Like,
Ka-cha.
That's amazing. And then he leaves and everybody's like, all right, well, the king's by himself. He must be going to the bathroom because it smells bad.
Because it smells bad because of whatever came out of him.
Right. And they wait, it says, until they were like embarrassed. Like, all right, he's been in there a long time. Let's go check on the king. They find him dead. By this time, the assassin guy's already gone. It's like, I think I said this last time, probably on the podcast, that we talked about this. Why has that not been a movie yet? Because that'd be awesome. That's an awesome movie.
Yeah.
We're also reading Corinthians.
Corinthians is fantastic. It's rich.
I love Corinthians.
Yeah.
Every time I read it, I'm like, man, Paul, you're all right.
Yeah, all right, Paul.
You're all right, Paul.
Some people don't like Paul.
Some people don't like
Some
Paul.
people don't like
that should be
Old Testament.
That should be an episode of the podcast. Why should we listen to Paul? Why is Paul in the Bible? We'll do it sometime.
And I'm just thinking through like conversations we've had lately with others.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about some of the weird stuff of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Is the God of the Old Testament different than the God of the New Testament?
Oh, snap. Yeah. There was an early heretic, Marcion, who thought so.
Well, you just spoiled it.
There was one guy who thought so. Was he right? You have to tune in to find out.
Love it.
Woo, 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 woo.
Oh my goodness.
That's the little song I'm writing.
All right.
All right. Well, let's move into our main topic for today. Like, I put an echo on it, but not like in post-production. I just did it in real time.
Oh, man. I thought you had some sort of magic thing going on.
Amazing. I know. So I was thinking, we briefly mentioned this somewhat recently, and I thought, let's spend some time to dive in a little bit deeper into this topic. And the question I was going to ask, Matt, is it all right for a Christian to own a gun? And as we dig into that, the question maybe is, does a Christian have a right to self-defense, and does a Christian have a right to defend his family?
Okay. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on back there. We live in America. We have the Second Amendment. So if you're listening to us outside of America and everybody thinks, oh, America's just gun crazy, we have too many guns. We do. We have more guns than we have people in our country. The Second Amendment. So the second thing we added after free speech was don't take our guns away.
Yeah.
Which is what ties back to what I was saying earlier about the government.
About the revolution
is part of that is to prevent tyrannical governments.
Right.
Although us having a couple 9mm, I don't think we'll do much against the U.S. Navy or Marines or Air Force. The U.S.?
Yeah.
We have, thousands
my
of
gun
nukes.
Probably cannot.
But if they start nuking their own people, they probably have a bigger problem. But they've got drones, right?
Oh, man.
If I formed a militia and we had a couple, long rifles and guns and things like that, and we are a legitimate threat to the country, they drone strike us and
they've been
gone.
testing the drone jets versus manned jets, like having dogfights.
Oh, really?
And I think drones are winning.
They're also testing drones with a missile that can take out, it's a non-explosive. I think it's like a guided controlled missile that's just got like a bunch of razor type things on the front that can take out like a single person in a car and leave everybody else okay.
See, that's just scary. Okay, let's get into our topic. The first thing that fourth thing you just said, when you're talking about people who live in other countries, we are explicitly told in Scripture to obey the laws of the land. Okay. Romans 13, 1 Peter 2, talk about that to us. And so I think as a Christian, my initial, and I know a lot of this conversation is going to probably surround gun control because that's where like a lot of people have issues as it relates to conservative Christians.
I would say there's part of that. And I think part of the issue is like, is it sinful?
Right.
To own
so
so
the current law of the land here in America allows me to have a gun.
Okay.
So as it relates to laws of the land and what God wants for me as a secondary citizen of America, I say that because my primary citizenship is in heaven. Everything I think, say, and do needs to be reflective of that. First and foremost, he's my priority, not America.
Right.
Okay. So that's why it's secondary. America's secondary.
Shocking.
So and I'm probably going to, at some point today, offend some of my conservative brothers and sisters.
All right. Sweet.
Because I might think differently than they do.
What? Thinking differently?
At the same time, I'm going to anger and upset
the more liberal
brothers? People, if any of them are listening to us, because I'll just throw my cards out there. Okay. I own guns.
What?
Plural.
Yeah. I do not.
Yeah. So I have, and I'll throw it out there and I'll explain my why, and we can talk about the Bible.
I have fired a gun once.
Okay.
Well, not like one pull. Like I went to...
You went to a firing range or shooting range
with my old boss at my old company.
I went to a shooting range with my current boss.
And in both instances, they were named Rick.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a shotgun that was Melinda's grandfather's, maybe.
Okay.
Really, really old. Not sure if it even works. It was gifted to me after he passed away. Cool. I'm not sure I'll ever fire that thing. Okay. It's more of...
Do you have ammo for it?
Nope. Not that I'm aware of. I have a cleaning kit for it that my father-in-law gave me.
Okay. Cool.
I don't think he gave me any ammo for it. I have a rifle that I bought originally because I wanted to go hunting.
Okay. What kind of rifle?
It's a 30-06. No, it's a single. You put the bullet in, you cock it, you get one shot. You put the bullet in, you cock it, you get one shot.
Do you know...
It's meant for hunting.
Fun fact for those of you listening who might not know this.
Smaller game.
When we talk about the AR-15, because that's the most controversial gun right now.
Right.
The AR does not stand for assault rifle.
Right. And so that's a common misconception.
That one drives me nuts. Anyway, continue.
I am very much in the camp of we don't need assault rifles.
What? Well, here's the biggest thing. And I'm not a gun enthusiast. Okay. I'll say that to start. I don't know a ton about guns. Mm-hmm. What is an assault rifle? That seems like a term that's not even real from my understanding. It's like, what is there an actual definition of what makes something a quote unquote assault rifle versus anything else? That seems like a very nebulous thing. Like, I think if we were going to talk about this realistically, we would need to say more specific terminology. As opposed to assault rifle, we're going to say semi-automatic or fully automatic or certain stock size or all these other things.
All that matters, I think.
Then that's more what matters than... Because I could show you a pistol that is configured in a certain way that you might be like, oh, that's an assault rifle.
Right. So we assume that if it's a big gun, it's an assault rifle.
Right. And that I think
if it has certain attachments, it's an assault rifle.
Right.
Assault rifles typically from what I've seen, heard, known, and I'm not a gun enthusiast either. We have several here at our church. And we can get into some of those details, but basically, it is assault rifles. You can switch between semi-automatic and fully automatic. Fully automatic means I pull the trigger and it just keeps firing.
Sprays, which are illegal in our country, right? Are there any fully automatic guns that are legal?
That are legal? I don't think so.
Okay.
Semi-automatic means I can just pull the trigger and keep pulling and it keeps firing.
Right.
So every time I pull that trigger, it fires. I don't have to do anything else.
You don't have to
You don't have to.
It's not pump action.
It's not pump. No, it's just trigger. So there's different elements that are in that. I think cartridge size or magazine, all that. The way it's chambered, I think, has to do with it. Yeah,
fast it goes.
When we say AR, that's a brand,
right? Armalite.
Armalite rifle. Yeah. Which is also interesting that we just associate. Like, I feel bad for a company who, like, that they don't just make the guns that you picture as that thing, right? But regardless of that, you asked the question, is it a sin for a Christian to own a gun?
Right.
And if it is, why? If it isn't, why not?
Correct.
Right?
There are 20 million AR-15s in the U.S. It's one of the most popular guns. So I don't feel too bad for
What's
them.
the population of the U.S.?
330 million.
Okay.
There's more than that in terms of guns.
So here's...
Which is funny.
I mean, we can get into the weird obsession we have with guns.
Right, and I would say that's because of the Second Amendment. It's in our historical DNA, for lack of a better word.
Right. So, biblically speaking,
yes,
we don't have anything in Scripture that talks about guns.
Correct.
They didn't exist.
Correct.
And so, like a lot of things in our world today, we're not going to get an explicit instruction that says, yes, own guns, use them, defend yourself, hunt with them, whatever, fill in the blank. We're not going to get that explicit instruction from Scripture. So we have to take the character of God, the heart of God, other things that he's been clear on throughout Scripture, and see how we can apply that to these newer things in our world. And I know guns have been around for hundreds of years, but it's still newer in the grand scheme of human history.
Yes.
And so I think you asked the question, self-defense, defending my family, is that okay? And this is where a lot of people, I think, get into a lot of heated arguments with it. Maybe not heated, but a lot of arguments, a lot of disagreements about it.
Sure.
Because we go to Jesus, right? If Jesus spoke about it, we should listen to it.
Yes.
A lot of people will say, well, the Old Testament said this, but like, that's the Old Testament. Things were different there.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm not going to fight you on that right now.
Right.
What does Jesus say then?
Let's go
You're
to
willing
what
to
Jesus
listen
says.
to Jesus. Let's talk about Jesus.
I love it.
So Jesus told his disciples, right, to sell their cloaks and go buy a sword if they didn't have one, right?
Yeah.
So I look at that on the surface and I'm like, all right, they're arming themselves for battle.
Well,
whether it's self-defense or initiating battle, they're arming themselves.
Yeah, and they obviously were armed because, was it Peter who cut the guard's ear off?
Right.
So he had something sharp.
So I think a lot of people, we stop there with Jesus saying, hey, if you don't have a sword, go get one.
Okay.
That is Jesus telling me, if I don't have a gun, go get one. Right? Like, be ready. Descriptive versus prescriptive. You just talked about that a little bit. I like to go to Peter in that situation when he sliced off the ear of one of the high
that was
priest
right
guards.
Before.
Uh-huh.
I'm looking a little bit about this now.
What did Jesus say to Peter in that situation?
Those who live by the sword will die by the sword.
Well, yeah,
right?
He basically rebuked Peter for pulling out his sword.
For using it.
To try and defend Jesus.
Right.
If there's anyone I'm going to defend, it should be Jesus, right?
Right.
Like, even before my wife and kids.
Right.
I'm
Let's back
Jesus.
it up a little bit. Jesus says, don't stand up to an evil person. Do not resist an evil person.
Do not resist evil.
When they strike one cheek, turn the other cheek and let them strike it as well. If they force you to go 1 mile, go 2. Right. So when it comes to our self-defense, would Jesus say turn the other cheek in every instance?
I would lean towards yes.
Okay. When it comes to defending somebody else, is it different?
I would lean towards yes.
Okay. If your kid was going to be attacked and you could save them by shooting the person who was going to attack them, Is that sinful?
Here's where things get tricky. And this is, I'm just going to talk through like my own personal thinking and convictions right now. I would do anything to protect my kids.
Yes.
Okay. I would do anything to protect my wife. I don't think I would do anything to protect me. Right.
But as the primary,
I am responsible for the protection of my family.
Right.
That
but you're
onus
also
is on me, right?
responsible for taking care of your family. And so is self-defense acceptable?
Taking care of them. Right. So that's where like I would lean towards, I need to get through this because my family needs me.
Right.
Now, is that prideful? Like, do they need me? They'll be fine without me. But
sure.
But God put them in my life. He put us together for a reason. I am my kid's dad for a reason, right? And so I think you say if someone is about to harm my kid in a way that is going to be detrimental, would it be okay for me to shoot them?
Yes.
That is absolutely going to be my last resort.
Right.
If for some reason I had a gun on me in the moment to be able to defend them,
yeah,
I'm going to do everything else I can
before you shoot
before
them.
I even consider, I have a gun. I can use it here.
All right, let me take you to another hypothetical.
Let's go.
All right. It's not, it's still your kid.
Okay.
But they're completely an adult at this point. Let's say they're 30. Let's say it's your oldest Mason and he's now 30. So we're that much into the future. There's some sort of crazy situation where there's this person who's threatening, blah, blah, blah. And you and Mason are able to have the conversation. He says, Dad, it's cool. I'd get to be with Jesus. And this guy would not if you were to kill him right now. He needs to know about Jesus, and it's okay if I die.
Oh. Like my kid says that too.
Yeah, you're able to have that conversation then. Would you still...
I mean, I'd be like, dude, you're 30, whatever. You have young kids. They need you more than they need me.
Sure.
Right? I've put in my time with you. If in this hypothetical situation, it was an option for me to have my life taken instead of his,
right?
I feel like I would sacrifice myself for that. Now, these are all hypothetical. We all think differently in the moment.
In the actual moment, I could just shoot the guy.
Right. Like, would I? Like,
probably. That's what I would do.
I don't think I'm trained and equipped enough to like have that confidence. I don't think. I've taken classes. I've gone to shooting ranges. I know how to operate a gun. Here's the thing. So police apparently are trained to shoot to kill.
Yes.
Shoot towards the
biggest center of mass, and
right?
to stop the person from whatever they're doing.
Right.
So shooting should be their last resort, but if it comes to that, you should not expect to survive it.
Yeah. So in my, like, I've run through situations in my mind many times before, right? Like, okay, I have a gun in my house. If someone were to break in with guns, threatening my family, what would I do? How could I protect them?
Yeah.
Without having to kill somebody, right? Because that's where I have the biggest issue.
So then maybe you could get a taser.
Yeah. Like
rubber bullets, maybe.
I picture through, I'm going to shoot him in the kneecap.
Yeah, no.
I'm not going to hit that in the moment,
you're
right?
not. You're going to hit,
like, no matter how good I am,
and then you're
at shooting targets. I am, and that's the other thing. How many times have we seen or heard about friendly fire?
Right.
Right. Or like I was aiming and I missed and I accidentally hit someone else or something
right.
else.
You need to
live with that.
You need to be very trained.
Yeah.
To use a gun.
Yeah.
So this is where maybe we can offend other people. Like, I'm fine saying you've got to show XYZ certification before you own a gun. Right. Just like I'm fine saying you have to pass a test before you can drive a car. Now, I guess I don't have a constitutional amendment that says I should be able to drive a car, whereas I do that says I should be able to have a gun. But I don't think licensing or having certain things in place that say, look, we're going to check to make sure you don't have a criminal history. We're going to check to make sure you don't have a history of mental illness, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the counter argument is going to be all that does is put in obstacles against the people who follow the rules, whereas the people who are going to get a gun to kill somebody don't really care about the law, so they're not going to follow this anyway. They're just going to buy it illegally.
Yeah. So I'm in the camp, and this is where I'm going to offend some of my conservative brothers and sisters. I am all for gun control.
Sure.
I get the argument that the people who are doing bad things with guns are going to do bad things with guns, whether we have laws or not.
Right.
Absolutely. Because it is illegal for me to take my gun and just randomly shoot people with it.
Right.
And the people who are taking guns and randomly shooting people with it are obviously breaking the law no matter what.
Sure.
However, as a law-abiding citizen, I'm not concerned that the extra background check, the extra couple days I have to wait to get my gun because they want to do a more thorough check,
sure,
mental history test, whatever it might be, I'm fine with it because I know that I'm going to pass those tests.
So I think that really the question that needs to be, it's like, all right, so, whenever you talk about shootings, it's going to come up like school shootings and how awful and terrible those are.
Absolutely.
Right? And so whenever something like that happens, inevitably it turns into a gun control discussion. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the question I would have is, would the law that you are proposing as a result of this have stopped this event?
Right.
And if the answer is no, then we need to think of something
What
different.
is going to stop those events?
What is? Now, if we want, this is kind of a tangent, so we're going to put a pin right there. Boop. Bing. Boop. I think that if you're trying to figure out like what type of gun control makes sense, it needs to be cracking down on the illegal gun purchases then, right? Are you doing more like harsher penalties towards people who are caught selling them illegally? Are you like what are you putting in place? Not instead of focusing on your as much energy maybe on the legal gun ownership, let's really try to focus on the illegal gun ownership.
If we're being honest, I feel like we have some pretty good gun control for legal gun owners.
Yeah.
Like when I got my first rifle, had to do the background check. I was in the store for very, very long time.
Right.
Waiting to get it because we had to go through all the process and get it licensed and get it registered to me. And then the onus for that particular weapon and what it does is now on me as its owner.
Right.
And so I have to step up my making sure that it is safe and locked away because if something happens, it falls on me because that is my weapon. Right.
Right.
It's interesting. We have this balance, and I feel like we have two extremes, right? You have like passivism at all costs.
Yep.
Or it's my God-given right to own all the guns.
Right.
Right. These are like our two extremes. I think biblically speaking, we're probably somewhere in the middle.
Probably.
I think there's arguments for both. Probably not great arguments for both, but there's arguments for both. Uh-huh. Right. I think it's in Exodus where it talks about if a thief comes in and breaks in and whatever my self-defense is, that thief dies, that blood guilt is not on me.
Right.
Right. That's written in Exodus.
It's like if they do it in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night. But if it's in the day, there is blood guilt on me.
Right.
Like it's a really confusing situation.
It gets a little bit into the weeds.
It gets a lot into the weeds. Luke chapter 22.
That's to sell your cloak to buy a sword.
Right. For I tell you, the scripture must be fulfilled in me, who is numbered with transgressions, for it's written about me. They said, look, here are 2 swords. And he said to them, it is enough. Right. So like his disciples say, look, we have 2 swords. I'm like, perfect. That's what we need right there. That's it. So like I come to Jesus, like, Jesus, I got 2 guns. Awesome. You're ready to go. Right. This is a defense for owning my weapon.
I would think that the Luke part is more about descriptive than prescriptive because
100%.
Because in Luke, they're trying to kill Jesus. We're trying to get, Jesus is like, I need to get to this point where I'm going to die the way I'm supposed to die. So maybe I need a little bit of extra protection. Like there's a plan that Jesus has in place. And he says, guys, buy some swords because then maybe that dissuades anybody attacking you until the time in which Jesus is ready to be taken in. Like there's a lot going on. And I don't know if we can draw the principle.
Right. which is why Jesus told Peter to put his sword back in his sheath, because
the time
Jesus knew what had to happen. And if Peter killed all those soldiers, that would have caused an issue with God's ultimate plan.
I feel like you've kind of answered mostly that if a Christian wants to own a gun, it's probably okay. Like you own a gun, you obviously don't have an issue with it. That is okay. Why? And I guess the flip would be true as well. If you don't want to, then don't, and that's totally fine as a Christian as well. There's freedom. Now maybe it should be like, when it comes to defending yourself, we should follow Jesus. But if it's trying to defend those who are weak, those who are unable to defend themselves, defending the defenseless, okay, all that, great. However, let's go into another hypothetical.
Okay.
If somehow, this is so hypothetical, it's not even funny, because this could never happen, I don't think. If the Second Amendment got overturned, right? Gun ownership became completely outlawed in our country. Would you oppose that, or would you say, okay?
Right. So I think
real quick, so many Christians, especially in the more conservative side we are, would say that is so wrong. You can't take that right away. It's that it becomes, it moves almost from, is this a sin, or there's freedom either way as a Christian, to no, this is a requirement as a Christian that you have this right.
So that if someone says it is a requirement as a Christian to own guns, or it's my God-given right to own guns,
right? Like I have a right, and I need to defend that right as much as more than I defend the right, to assemble for church, almost, right?
Right. So with that, I think if a bill is brought before Congress, follow the democratic process. Stand up for what you think is best for our country as a Christ follower through the democratic process. Now, I don't think that in that situation, I then take up arms against my government. I think that would...
But isn't that the point of the Second Amendment, so that we can take up arms if they try to take it away?
Tyrannically, sure. But if it's through the democratic process as a citizen of...
Which is why it'll never happen.
Right.
The amount of... You'd have to change the Constitution.
Right.
You'd have to create a new amendment. And to create a new amendment, you need 2/3 of the states to agree.
Right. It would never happen.
Although they banned alcohol in the early 1900s.
Banned TikTok.
Yeah, but that's not that's not a constitutional amendment, which is why it's going to go to the Supreme Court.
Yeah. So it's funny. I think we just read this a couple days ago in our Bible plan through 1 Corinthians, when Paul talks about all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful, right?
Right.
All things are permissible, but not all things build up.
Are beneficial.
Beneficial, yeah. And so I think through, with something like guns, like before I get a weapon, before you get a weapon of any kind, what's your motivation?
Right.
Okay. I think that's important. So protecting life, protecting family, I think that's a good motivation to think through.
Sure.
Obviously, revenge, things like that is a bad thing? Motivation.
Oh, what about because they're really cool and I like to shoot them?
Okay. So some people are like collectors.
Right.
That I don't necessarily have an issue with. An unhealthy obsession with anything would be bad. So I want you to check that.
What if I had a gun in my house, but I never kept ammo? And it was because I could potentially be like not threatening, but like if somebody was trying to attack me, I could say, hey, I got a gun.
Right.
And then
I see your gun, I potentially run.
I like to shoot it. So I buy ammo and I go to the gun range.
And then you waste all your ammo there, or you use all your ammo there. You come home, it's
totally
completely empty.
Right.
That's probably the safest way to have a gun, because then if like a kid somehow in your household accidentally gets a hold of it, there's not an accidental fire that happens.
Now, if the person breaking into your house also had a gun, you've escalated it. And
right.
You
He's
can't do
fire
anything about it
immediately, and you're doomed. I think owning guns because of these exaggerated conspiracy theory type of things, probably bad, right? I'm going to buy up as many guns and as many boxes of ammo as I possibly can now because the government's going to try and take it from me, and now I'm going to be ready.
But what if the world ends and we need to defend
I'm ready
ourselves?
for the end of the world, right? All those types of things. I'm like,
yeah, here's the thing. If the world ends and most of our population was decimated, again, we have more guns than people. I bet you could find some.
Right. At some point, and here's where, again, I'm going to offend people. At some point, where does faith come in?
Right.
Like, yes, I'm going to stand up for the defenseless. I'm going to defend the defenseless.
Right.
With or without guns, I'm going to defend the defenseless. I'm going to stand up for my family with or without guns. Again, I don't have an issue with guns because I own them.
Right.
But with everything that I do, like as a Christ follower, I need to pray. I need to ask for his discernment, his guidance, right? His commandment to me is to love God and to love people first and foremost. So owning a gun, I need to weigh in light of that. Owning a sword, I need to weigh in light. Owning anything, everything I do, how does this help me to love God and love people? And I think you can defend it. You can say, yeah, I have these guns because it's fun, right? It's just a hobby for me.
Right.
Right. You play video games. I go to the shooting range. Great. Awesome.
Let's do it.
I own a gun because I want to make sure that I'm able to defend my family if the worst case scenario happens.
Right.
All right. Sure. Let's do it. I own guns because I'm afraid of my government. I'm not as let's not live in the spirit of fear.
Right.
Let's live in the spirit of confidence, knowing that Jesus has, told us how the story ends.
Right.
Right. Like I know how the story ends, so I'm not going to live in fear. I'm going to live in hope and in confidence. And maybe I might, heaven forbid, ever have to use a gun on a person. Right. Like that would be the absolute last reason for me.
Right.
You own guns because you hunt and you provide for your family that way.
Oh yeah.
Sweet.
Go for it.
I'll take some of that elk meat if you ever get some. My problem is I'm a sissy. And so hunting those particular animals that would provide meat to my family, our hunting season here in Colorado and locations that we're allowed to do it, dude, it's cold.
But if the world ends, you'd have to do it.
Right. If the world ends, though,
we're ready.
We probably don't have any laws saying I'm only allowed to hunt elk at this particular time in this particular location with this particular permit. If I see an elk in the middle of summer, I'm taking it out because I need to eat.
Right.
Right. End of the world situations are different than our day-to-day situations where I can also just go to the grocery store and buy some chicken.
That's true.
Yeah. I don't know. Guns are a tricky one. I think personal conviction matters. I think forcing your beliefs onto someone else when you don't have like the Bible tells me this is what I have to do. Mm-hmm. I think my conviction of saying, yes, it's okay for me to own a gun, I will never force that on someone who says, my conviction says I'm not going to own a gun.
Right.
Great. Like scripture doesn't say God
commands
you to own guns or God commands you to never own a weapon.
All right. Last question, and then we'll move on because this is kind of a long one today. It's kind of fun.
We say that every week.
I love it. In this hypothetical, the world has more or less ended, right? Okay. We live in a wasteland of few survivors. 10% of the population's left, and it's just apocalyptic in the modern sense, not literal sense. Is it stealing if I go to the ruins of King Soopers and just grab whatever canned goods I can and bring them to my shelter?
That's funny. So I assume at that point, this King Soopers is no longer a functioning grocery store.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the government as we know it
has ceased to exist.
Exist.
In this scenario.
So is there anyone claiming, does anyone have ownership of that stuff in that store?
All right, so let's say some roving band of ne'er-do-wells has set up shop there. They said, "This is our territory now, boy." And you sneak in under the cover of darkness and take some canned beans. Is that?
I feel like there's movies about this type of stuff. It's kind of fun.
There should be.
Is that stealing? Because someone has already claimed. Man, I mean, if we want to get really like hoity-toity about it, that was the wrong phrase.
Hoity-toity.
I apologize.
No, I like it.
Yeah, it might be if someone else has ownership of that thing and you're taking it from
What
them?
if they don't have a legitimate claim to ownership, though? What if they stole it first?
Well, I stole. Do two wrongs make a right? Like you stole it, so I'm going to steal from you.
Two wrongs don't make it
Or
right.
Robin Hood robbed from the rich to give to the poor. He has like a
right
good
intention,
but he's still stealing.
Right. So two wrongs don't make a right, but two rights made an airplane.
And three lefts make a right.
That's
weird.
not okay. All right. Let's move on because unless you've got an answer, is it okay to provide for your family, Matt? They're starving in the apocalypse. And this guy has executed anybody who he doesn't like.
Well, why would I go try and take for? He's going to execute me.
You got to steal it. You got to sneak in under the cover of darkness and take it. Because your answer to this is going to determine what I do when the world ends. Like, do I head out to Matt because I know we're going to go raiding together? Or do I find somebody else who's got the ability to do it?
The second the world ends.
Yeah.
And I
the
suppose
government collapses.
The government collapses. King Soopers is no longer an organization. There's no like management ownership system for that location. I'm going there first. I'm claiming it first.
You're trying to claim it.
Yeah.
What if
it'll be mine?
Well, the manager's there and he's like, "This is now mine."
I'd be like, "Hey, bro, I got a family of 6. Like, let's work together. I have some stuff I can hook you up with." Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
I think a bartering system.
Right, but when the despotic warlord descends upon it with his gang of roving, crazies with like chainsaws and stuff.
I've already taken everything I needed. I've hidden it in my bunker. I don't have a bunker in Hawaii. Mark Zuckerberg.
Only if it's got a blue
with a blue roof. Well, it's a bunker, so it's underground. You can't see the roof.
Here's the thing. I was reading more about that. Celebrities always make bunkers. It's been happening for 50, 60 years. There's nothing new about it.
Wait, so it's not like
it's not they have
they know something that we don't know?
No, it's that they've got more money than they know what to do with. You might as well build it because it's a blip in your wealth and then you're ready in case.
Yeah, we were talking about that recently. Like, what happens if you won that like $1 billion lottery and you're only getting 400 million after all the taxes and fees and all that stuff, right? Like that is a lot of money. So sure, build a bunker in Hawaii. Might as well.
Why not? All right, let's move into our AI list where we ask the AI anything. And by special request, I will be putting images in the YouTube video this week. So if you are listening only, head on over to our YouTube page and watch at least this section. The thing that I asked it, not related at all again today, is what are the top 10 church potluck dishes ranked by biblical authenticity?
What? All right.
So top 10 church potluck dishes. So the first thing we have to answer is, are these things you would bring to a church potluck? And these are ranked by their biblical authenticity.
Okay.
All right. So you got to tell me if these are things that you would bring. Number 10, a date honey dessert. Honey, often mentioned as a sign of prosperity and well-being in the Bible, i.e., a land flowing with milk and honey, in the form of date honey, is perfect for a sweet finish.
You know what's weird about that?
Tell me.
Both date and honey are like things that you can associate with your significant other.
Oh, I'm going to go on a date
with my honey.
So it's not really, calling it honey is kind of a misnomer because it's just date sugar, right? It's just taking date and turning it into a honey-like substance.
I thought that was saying like I'm using honey and
date
dates
honey
in my
dessert.
dish.
It says in the form of date honey is perfect for a sweet dish.
Well, all right. I'm fine with you creating a dessert made with dates and or honey.
Okay. And that's biblically accurate. Has it ever been a church potluck where you've had something specifically with that?
Date honey, no.
Okay. Number 9, olive oil dip. Olive oil was highly valued and used in biblical times, not just for cooking, but also for anointing and lighting lamps. Great with unleavened bread.
Can you give me a little bit of vinegar and some fresh cracked pepper?
Yes. Macaroni Grill. They're the ones that used to do that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And you could draw on the tablecloth.
Yeah.
Number 8, goat cheese. often referred to in the context of pastoral life in ancient Israel. Goat cheese is tasty and authentic biblical food.
So here's what
These are just biblical dishes.
You specifically asked for potluck.
I did, and it's not doing a great job.
None of this would actually show up at a potluck. So
maybe some kind of a cheese dish, though.
Sure, using goat cheese in my
This isn't gourmet
casserole.
Church potluck.
Right, I'm making the cheapest, quickest. Yeah. All right, what's next?
I do like goat cheese, though. Number 7, bitter herbs salad. A part of the Passover meal meant to remind the bitterness of slavery. It's both symbolic and a healthy addition to the menu. I don't think AI has ever been invited to a church potluck.
No, maybe next time we have one, let's invite AI.
Okay, AI, you are invited.
See, we've kind of stopped doing church potlucks and we more do church picnics.
What's the difference? Because we don't say luck.
Well, yeah. Or pot.
No. Number 6, roasted lamb.
Yes,
reminiscent
please.
of the Passover lamb, the dish is not only biblically authentic, but also a substantial meal.
When cooked right, I'm all for it.
I love lamb, not lamb. Now, Matt, real quick,
yes,
I got to tell you, the image though for the roasted lamb that it came up with,
I'm excited to see them.
I'm going to just show you.
It's a full lamb with its horn still attached, just charred.
So, what do you think? What do you think of that? What do you think of them apples?
I think it's a little bit creepy.
It's a little bit creepy.
Wait, is it served with like an apple jelly? Apple
it doesn't
jam?
say. Okay. Number 5, fig cakes. Figs are often mentioned in the Bible, and a fig cake, as in 1 Samuel 25, is a delightful nod to ancient agricultural practices. So this is telling us the stuff we should bring to a potluck to be biblically accurate. So the next potluck we've been doing potlucks all around. We're going to assign
Can I just
these
bring
for
fig
everybody.
Newtons?
As long as they're homemade.
Right?
Number 4, a honeycomb. Mentioned as John the Baptist food along with locust. But let's stick with the sweeter option for the potluck.
Here. Question.
Yeah.
Honey. I get that.
Yeah.
Honeycomb.
Well, you didn't have a container for it back then.
But like, do people eat?
I don't think you eat the. I think you like
eat like
slurp
the honey off the comb. If you know,
we have our general producer is a biologist. He keeps bees, right? He gets his own honey.
He does have his own bees and honey. Yeah.
Do you eat the honeycomb?
He's not here today, so like,
I know. I'm asking him when he watches this.
Yeah.
Do you eat the comb or just the honey?
I've had his honey from his bees. It's really good.
Delicious.
And it's different, like depending on what time of year, because like of the different flowers that are being the bees are using. It's really cool. Like sometimes it's more lavender. That one was really unique. Man, did you have the one that was like pretty heavy on the lavender?
That sounds really good though.
So
I love
fun.
honey.
Honey's fun.
Number 3, fish and loaves. I would have said loaves and fishes. The AI doesn't know what it's talking about. Inspired by Jesus feeding the 5,000, ideal for a large gathering and always a reminder of provision.
Here's the thing. At a church potluck, I don't know if I want anyone bringing fish. I don't know if I trust it enough just sitting out in the heat of the day and was it cooked right? And
I wouldn't want that at a potluck either. Number 2, unleavened bread. Straight out of the Exodus story. This bread is simple, quick to make, and deeply symbolic.
And then you dip it in that oil dip.
In the olive oil that you had earlier. Perfect. And finally, number 1, lentil stew. Echoing Esau's choice to sell his birthright for a tasty dish of lentils, authentic and hearty, perfect for a biblical themed potluck.
Again, potlucks. I visualize us hanging out outside. It's summertime. I do not want lentil stew.
No,
now
but
if we're doing an indoor food gathering in the winter,
potluck,
that
big
sounds
old
great.
Pot of
big
stew.
old pot of lentil stew.
Actually, that would be really good.
Let's go.
And the only one that you might see that at a potluck, some sort of bean stew hearty thing.
Bean stew.
I
don't know why I went with that.
I don't either, but I liked it. Well, that was our AI list. It was a little strange. I don't know if it quite got the assignment.
Yeah.
What, email us, podcast@dfchurch.com. What should I ask the AI? Let me know in the comments below or email us. Now, speaking of emails and comments, we didn't get any emails, but we did get some comments. So on our YouTube video, first of all, I posted a little bit of a short video where we're talking about, is the church more than Sunday morning services? And you said, I am the church. And then some people had some...
Yeah, what do you do with that? Yeah.
Some comments on that. One of them said, I am the church sounds like a worse version of I am the law, which I'm thinking is from South Park. Isn't that what Cartman says that?
I don't know.
And I responded to this guy. I said, it's more like Palpatine. I am the Senate.
You goober.
It made me laugh.
Yeah.
But realistically, this guy says, quote, where you are, the church is not in the Bible. When he mentions church per se, God is also saying to gather. In Hebrews 10:25, he even says to do it more when you see the day approaching, speaking about the end of the days, and strongly asks you to do this as well. What do you think about that? Do you disagree?
No. Yeah, I think the phrase is more like we are the church that I hear more often than I am, right? The church is the people. It's not the building is what I was getting at with that.
Okay.
Right. Church isn't four walls, isn't a steeple, isn't pews. It isn't stained glass.
Right.
Right. It's not the building itself. It's the people are the ecclesia, the church. And so, where there is a gathering of people, obviously for a purpose, that's where you see the ecclesia.
So on this episode, we had a lot of comments. Our friend Heather, who we talked about last time, continued to comment. Thank you so much. We got a little bit more info about you. We do kind of know. Yeah,
we know who you are now. So thank you.
So that's good.
That's awesome.
It's not an unknown, but if it was, that's even cool because we did get an unknown. But one person, Heather, says, what part of Romans 1 is so difficult to understand? The church must stop tolerating evil in the name of love. Jesus did not do that. He always said, go and sin no more. And somebody else responded, Romans. It's one thing to be ignorant, but it's another thing to make that ignorance a hammer against others. What do you think that means?
I don't know.
Romans. It's one thing to be ignorant, but it's another thing to make that ignorance a hammer against others.
So one person's saying Romans 1 is clear and the other is saying you don't know Romans.
Right. And you're using that as a hammer against others. Now, I would assume they are going with, I've heard an interpretation, and I don't agree with this at all. This is not what Romans is saying. But there will some people who say that in Romans 1, he is talking about people, because it says, they abandoned what's natural and pursued an unnatural relationship. Right. And so some people have said this isn't about committed same-sex attracted people, but people who are heterosexual, but who pursue a same-sex relationship. Because they're abandoning what they have and pursuing what's unnatural. Huh. Now, I don't think that's what the verse is saying. Right. I think it's pretty clearly that it's not saying that. But maybe that's what this guy's argument is. I don't know. If you're watching this right now, you can let us know.
Yeah, I think the key is we don't encourage sin. We don't affirm sin.
Right.
But we love people. Even when Jesus told people to go and sin no more, he was always filled with love in it. He accomplished what they were looking for, right? Mm-hmm. That healing, that miracle, whatever it might be. And he always called them out of their life of sin into this life of holiness.
Yeah.
And I think that's our responsibility for people who know Jesus. When we see sin in their lives, we call them out of that sin into holiness. Mm-hmm. We also receive that from others. Right? When we have sin in our lives, we need to be willing to hear from our brothers and sisters in Christ and calling that out into that sin no more. But when I approach someone with just like hate or a heavy hammer, sure, that's not Christ-like.
Right.
Christ didn't do it that way. Now, maybe we can argue he did. He flipped some tables at the temple.
He did flip some tables.
Seems a little bit more aggressive than just using your words, but also, time and place, I think, mattered, and he knew the context of the situation, and just using his words wasn't going to work in that situation.
Right.
I don't know. It's interesting.
Last comment I want to read. It's another one that's a little antagonistic. I kind of like. Sometimes it gives us a chance to respond.
Yeah.
So we had posted again another clip from last week's episode talking about are some sins worse than others, and how sexual sin is actually in its own category of worse than others.
Which here's the thing, real quick. Like those shorts.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're pulling a small section out of the context of a bigger section. And it's hilarious because you could totally... I was watching some of these shorts and I was like, I said that way, but then you look at it in the context of the whole thing and it's like, okay, that's why he said that. So it's fun.
It's fun. So we were talking about how
sexual sin
can be worse. This guy's or girl, actually it's a girl, Annabelle something, says, then you say kids don't need sex ed, and when they are molested, they don't have the vocabulary they need to tell authorities what happened.
Who says that?
You do.
Me.
Apparently.
Why?
Because you said that some sexual sin is worse than others.
You said that. Actually, the Bible says that.
Well, both of us kind of talk about it in this.
That.
Well, the Bible says it, yeah.
So
what?
So I'll respond to Annabelle.
Yeah, this comment is coming from a place not about, honestly, what we talked about in the video, but more, it seems, maybe personal trauma. I don't know. But yeah, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so I think sex ed is super important. I think parents should be regularly having these discussions with their kids. And we teach our kids from a very young age the proper names for their bodies. Like we don't say your pee pee and your bum bum, right? We don't use, no offense to anyone who does, but like we don't use that because we want our kids to know what a penis is, what a vagina is. Like I know, oh no, Matt just said that on the podcast. Like
now I have to mark this as mature audiences only.
Oh, I know, we got to bleep that out. We use the actual names of body parts so that our kids are aware, so that if something were to ever happen, guess what? They're able to actually say what happened. Right. And we say things like those specific body parts are not for anyone else. Right. The only people who are allowed to see them are you, your mom and dad, and then your doctor with your mom and dad's permission. Outside of that, they're not for anyone else until you're married. Right. And then there comes a certain age where they're not for mom and dad either.
Now,
once you're at the age of consent to say, okay, doc, you can take a look at me.
So I think that and this is maybe a different topic entirely. I don't think this is a different topic entirely. But I think there is a squeamishness about sexuality in the church that has been to our detriment. And so because of that, there are a lot of instances where this type of attitude can grow, or where things are, where for so long that I think the attitude of the church has been sex is bad, not sex outside of God's design is bad. And because of that, it has led to a lot of problems. And we've talked a little bit about this with like 90s purity culture and things like that. But it's this idea that, yes, the church has unfortunately taken a message that any discussion or talking about sexuality is wrong. So
I don't know where that's coming from with the whole
I don't know
sex ed part, but I don't know.
Should I respond? I don't know what you're talking about.
What you talking about, Willis?
What you talking about, girl? Well, next week, we have a pretty fun episode. So a lot of us here on staff and our elder board are going to be attending a conference on discipleship. So if all goes according to plan, we will be bringing you a special podcast from the conference, from the different people who are attending, letting you know some of the big highlights, things we've learned, things that got us excited. So it should be a mishmash of a lot of different voices talking through about things that stuck out at them from the conference. And again, don't forget, please email us podcast@dfchurch.com or comment on these videos. But we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.